Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio.
Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and human rights. Alright, welcome back to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media Radio. I'm your host, Michael Clogs. Today we're going to totally focus on British Columbia, and we're actually going to have a friend of mine come on the show, and she is a teacher in the Surrey School District. And let me say this much. One of the reasons why she is my friend is not simply because I like her as a person, but I like what she does for the community also. She puts herself out there in ways as a teacher and what she teaches in her classroom that is waking up minds. Some things have happened in there have been some recent events that may be a little disturbing for a teacher to see happen to them. But it would seem that the community is standing behind her because, again, when someone is going to open up my child's mind, I want to warmly invite that person to do so. And especially if they're doing so in very positive ways. It isn't just that she gets them to understand a corporate agenda. She gets them to analyze that corporate agenda and decide for themselves if that agenda is what they believe in. Now, it's kind of interesting that we're bringing about the idea of corporate agenda because there has been a corporate agenda, a government agenda that has been introduced into the school system, and it's not necessarily bad, it's not necessarily good. Myself personally, I sit on the fence with it. And should personal identity be taught in school? And that's what it all amounts to with what they are calling SOGI. It isn't about LGBTQ rights. It isn't trying to groom children into becoming something that they may or may not be. It is about teaching children in the classroom what their personal identity should be. Not necessarily a bad thing, but depending on how it is represented, could be harmful. Because you could actually push a child off in the wrong direction. But more than that, what we need to be able to do is, the government has one agenda with this, and I'm sure the corporations have an agenda with it because it does involve them being able to sell more and more medications or whatever to these children so that of course they make more money. But And whenever corporations make more money, of course, the governments are always all for that because, hey, that's how government in our neck of the woods works. It's like they get funding from the corporations to run their campaigns, and in turn they put things in place to help the corporations make more money. But SOGI is more than that. SOGI isn't about grooming children to be something they're not. SOGI is the anti-SOGI movement isn't just about stopping or curbing the agenda that may be in place. It's way more than that. Okay. If SOGI was simply just about teaching kids to think clearly about who they are and who they want to be, we might not be seeing the level of protesting that there is. And allowing a child at a certain level to explore the ideas of what it could be like to be a cat, a dog, a monkey, or whatever, opens the imagination. And personally, I warmly invite that. Anything that opens up an imagination and allows a mind to think freely is a good thing. But here's what it has actually gone wrong. It isn't SOGI itself. It is the politicization and the polarization that has occurred over this particular school policy. That's where we're running into problems. That's where the protests are coming out, because it is completely politicized. It is politicized to the point that we have, and you're going to hear this in today's show, and I think it's disturbing when we hear a MLA candidate say that books should be banned in the schools. Remember, he's the member of the legislative party that would form the laws for British Columbia. Do we want someone like that in office? When we start banning books, we start burning knowledge. Books were freely written so that the knowledge could be shared. It could be discussed so that ideas could be moved forward. So we have that end of things, that they talk about planting themselves in front of a school, disrupting classes so that they can get their point across, and they call it saving the children. On the other hand, that while we're currently in a period of election in British Columbia, that this whole agenda is not being talked about in healthy ways. That they're pushing forward other agendas that are they seemingly more important, while they're kind of pushing this one aside in the political debates. One, it is a extremely hot potato, shall we say. It's like, if you have children, you will do anything, and I do mean absolutely anything, to protect your children. Okay. So the whole topic is being politicized. The whole topic of LGBTQ rights is being politicized, and it doesn't have to be politicized the way it's being talked about. It's being talked about with agendas instead of focusing on the one simple thing. Let's stop the bullying and allow people to be who they want to be. Let's end the corporate agendas that would shame people for being different, and let's celebrate the diversity that we have within our communities. Let's stop trying to do things like ban books and limit knowledge, and open knowledge so that it is freely given to our children, and a warm and welcoming environment so that our children know that they can think for themselves. Okay, so why don't we push forward, and we're going to listen to my friend as I interview her talking about her views and why she wants to push SOGI forward in the school systems so that it does things like ends bullying, so that it causes policies so that teachers have concrete policies about who is bullying and what religious creeds are welcome, what political thoughts and agendas are welcome in the schools, what things are happening in the community can be talked about in a safe way. That's what teaching is all about. And I'm glad to have a good friend and teacher join me in a conversation about making a safe teaching environment. All right. Okay, so welcome to the show, Annie. And today there is a queer march happening. Is that correct?
Well, it's actually an anti-SOGI protest, and then there's a counter protest happening in Vancouver.
Counter protest happening in Vancouver. So explain to me a little bit why you're
A
involved.
year ago, on September 20th, there was a national day of protest by people who were against the inclusion of all kinds of things related to LGBTQ plus representation in schools, as well as other forms. So you might hear words like wokeness and kind of when you take on topics that are more political in nature. So there was a large protest. In Surrey, BC, what occurred was that, unlike other communities where the protesters were few and the counter protesters were many, in Surrey it was the opposite. We had around, I want to say, 3,500 people show up to the Minister of Education's offices, which is where the Surrey Teachers Association building is. We own the building. And so what occurred was you had people suggesting that kids are being mutilated in schools, that SOGI was hurting kids, that and any number, right? There was some violence where some teachers were injured. So it was there's this ongoing theme that education needs to change, and that different representation of individuals, of history, don't necessarily need to be included in schools. Where I stand is really at the opposite of that. So most teachers, we believe that SOGI really began because we saw the mental health of our students deteriorating. We continue to see huge amounts of bullying and shaming towards all kinds of kids, to include those students that were part of the LGBTQIA plus community. Mm-hmm. And so over a number of years, there was a development of, just ways that schools could be that were more open, diverse, and respectful spaces. So I'm on that side. So what I mean is that today, the counter protest in Vancouver is by people trying to protect the idea of an inclusive school where two LGBTQ communities can kind of exist freely, and our SOGI is not a curriculum, but like that we make sure that our policies respect all children. I hope that makes sense.
That does make sense, because as a teacher, wouldn't you agree that we should be allowing our children to be who they want to be without any sort of stigmas, stereotypes, or or negativity, right?
100%. And I think maybe that's where some people are confused, where there are parents who do have concerns, is that perhaps they feel that in the way they live their lives, that perhaps that's not represented fully in schools. Which is interesting because I think with ongoing conversation, things can get better. I teach in an area where we have all these amazing newcomers who have different traditions, and we've just folded that into our school, right? We welcome it, right? It's
Right.
open. We have different celebrations. You don't have to cut it out. I think one distinction I have to make is that I completely agree with you. And so these protests that are happening, what we've noticed over the last several years, really, um, it's a continuation of policies in place in the 90s and before, where they banned certain books, right? I mean, we had a case that went to the Supreme Court with a kindergarten teacher, James Chamberlain, that took that on, and we won those cases every single time. So it's become very vitriolic. It's become to the point where teachers, including myself and many others, are being defamed, are being slandered, are being libeled against, and it's gone way past the idea of parents and students, feeling respected and heard in their buildings, right? It's become a very negative atmosphere, that really tends to want to take away spaces rather than make them bigger.
Yeah. Well, okay, you actually work in a public school, which is actually controlled
Yes.
by the government. Uh,
Yes.
isn't there a point that maybe the government should take a step back from our personal lives and be a little bit less involved in in our personal lives and a little less involved in the personal lives of our children so that our children are free to be who they want to be?
And to be honest with you, I think that is what our education system is trying to do. That as a teacher in a secular public school, I am not going to dictate what culture, what tradition, what faith, and what expression, to within, the Charter of Rights, right, within reasonable limits, that's in the first section of our charter. That is the goal. And so any students, if a student wants to paint their nails, or they want to use their traditional name, like whatever example you can think of, they want to wear a hijab, they like to wear, they dress a little differently than your typical student. Like it's not for us to control that. Again, within safe and reasonable limits, of course. And in terms of really listening to parents as well. Again, parents are always part of the public school system. People are trying to say that they're not, but they are, to the point, a very specific policy point, a way that what you said about the government stepping back, is what we have always had in place. Number one, that we send parental consent forms for most activities, right? For, whether it's a field study, I teach secondary, so people might, or it's a sports day, or there's a specific speaker coming in. And also that by law, we are mandated, the government mandates this, that parents can ask, or students, whatever, both, either, can ask for alternative assignments. And that is the duty of the administrator, and teachers to provide that alternative space. So it's not just about here's what we teach, here's what on the BC government website in terms of curriculum. There really is a back and forth, and parents and people who take care of kids can engage in a dialogue about what that education looks like.
Yeah. Um, I like what you just said. That's kind of the point of of education is to have an open and safe environment, and that safe environment. I'm assuming that you stop at the bullying of one student or one student against the other, and maybe a teacher against a student, right?
Absolutely. And teacher towards another teacher, right? Staff member to staff member. This is our entire society. Your boss versus the employee. And again, I love examples for this, right? So you might have a student that says, according to my faith, we don't, we think that being LGBTQ is a sin. Okay. And I've had kids tell me that, and we've discussed it, right? Where that line is not to change their belief. It's rather to say, so if in the hallway a student is being made fun of, right? And they're saying, oh, you talk weird or you dress weird, whatever, right? They're making another student feel uncomfortable. What is in our school, we use, we say citizenship, right? So how can you be the best school citizen in that situation? Do you join in on the bullying because you happen to think that LGBTQ is a sin, or because you're seeing someone's physical, mental, spiritual, emotional space being violated? Do you at least go tell a teacher, right? Miss Ohana, there's something going on outside, right? There's a kid crying and I think they're being bullied. That's it, right? And it doesn't mean that I'm there to change a student's opinion. Right. But of course, like in terms of diversity, I want to include books about different faiths. I want to include, books about people that do great things in our world, that come from different parts, that have different identities. I think it's worth reminding ourselves not too long ago, Black, Indigenous, people of color, women, those stories were not at all in our textbooks. They were in fact banned. And in some places in the States, that's happening again. Jewish stories, like all kinds of things that were denied. So to me, it's the same thing. Just that LGBTQ issues is another identity. And so it should be treated the same as anything else.
Yeah. One last question. I'm going to make this sort of a global question with what we're seeing on the global scene with things like Afghanistan, the U.S. president campaigns on both sides. Now we're not going to pick sides. In other things with sexual violence that is happening in combat situations and everything. Do you think that as a human race that we're forgetting that human rights should exist?
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And to be honest, I think it's almost like everything's been weaponized and politicized, right? Our students' lives should not be politicized. Human rights should not be this game, right? I think politicians of all kinds are trying just to get power. And what really saddens me, because my background is in criminology and political science and like legal background, is that, as a person who comes from an immigrant family, we really uphold the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We love that document. I went to high school in Southern Florida, and the Bill of Rights, right? That means the world to me, right? Because it sets up a true sense of, the rights of a human. And we can always make them better, but generally speaking, like these are supreme law documents that really tell us and protect us. Because yes, you have freedoms, and in Canada, within a reasonable limit, right? That's I think the most important words in Canadian law, within reasonable limit. So when you see politicians sidestepping by using Section 33 for policies like we're talking about today, when you see in America, governors and Congress and even judges making decisions that strip rights away, when actually they're not even realizing what could go wrong, right? You look at abortion laws, things of that nature, and what's happened, as a consequence. Absolutely, it seems like our beliefs, our holding up of what is one of the most important parts of our democracies just doesn't seem to be as important anymore. They're almost like, we're going to break the law and then like let the people go to court over it. I don't want 7 or 9 people, deciding my life, right? I don't want the government to control my life. Or our schools or our homes or our places of worship. I want to live in a society that protects one another, right? That we can say, I see you as a human, you see me as a human, and so we're going to protect one another so that we make good laws to begin with. That we govern our communities ourselves with a sense of love and empathy and understanding, and we can hold each other accountable. I don't want to be told, I disagree with you, I'm going to pass a law that's going to hurt you, and good luck over the next 10 years trying to overturn that law. That I think goes against the human rights nature that both Canada and America, the Bill of Rights is obviously older than the Charter, but, I guess we can say since 1948 at least, that seem to a lot of us are the cornerstone of why we're so proud to be citizens of Canada. And then we see places like Afghanistan and other places where human rights are just non-existent.
Yeah. I couldn't have said that any better myself. I like exactly the way you put that, because we, like you said, in the U.S., the Supreme Court, they made a judgment that should have been over the legal immunity of the president. The president was supposed to lie within Congress.
Yeah.
And they have now removed that safety. And then of course the falling of Roe versus Wade in the Supreme Court. And then I've brought up the example of Afghanistan because there is a recent meme out there that actually showed the Afghani women looking like any other woman that you would have seen during the 1960s or 1970s at the time. Yeah, fashion and everything being the same. And and now it has become so very different. So
that's such a good point, right? Like Afghanistan has such a rich history and culture. And it's just been the last, since the Cold War, right? Where you've seen the real downward spiral. And here we are now. It's worse than it's ever been. And it's not just the Taliban's fault, right? Obviously, the Taliban are the ones that are in government, but we really seem to have let down the Afghani people. And you see women that can no longer speak in public, like voices can no longer be heard. That is so frightening, right? That is so absolutely scary. Might I note though that, I saw recently a protest. There were actually Afghan women walking down Kabul, daring to speak. And so, I hold out hope. I hope that no matter what Supreme Court or government or whatever, enacts, that there are people that are willing to stand up for their human rights.
Yeah. I like that also, because the bottom line is we need to be able to stand up for our own human rights. So
absolutely. Yeah.
With that being said, thank you for your time today, and
absolutely.
And to everybody listening, is the best way for us all to stand up for our human rights, especially if we live in a democracy, get to the polls and cast a vote when it is.
Yes, absolutely.
It is the best way to make change.
Yeah. 100%. Please vote. I don't care who you vote for, but vote and ask questions of your candidates. I've gone to several debates already, and I'm finding myself in certain, not all the time, but there's moments where candidates are escaping questions or they don't even show up. And that worries me, right? So if you can, try to find the time to ask candidates for real detailed answers, so that when you go to the polls, you go really knowing what you're voting for, and not just a party name or a person's name. There are good people running, and also if they want to represent us, they have to be able to give us their full opinions and as much as possible, like actual policies that they would put in place. So, if you're gonna, if we cast our votes, we should always cast our votes, but also, like, let's push our representatives to be better. Let's push our governments to actually earn our votes and not just expect us to vote for them because of whatever, some sort of loyalty or a single issue.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to move on into clips from the protests that happened in Surrey. As we actually have a camera crew that will be right there on the scene at Rachna Singh's constituency office.
Yeah.
All right.
We don't toe the party line. There's no party whip. We're not told that we have to vote with David Eby, John Russad, whoever, in order to keep our job. We represent our constituents. Unlike all of the corrupt mainstream parties who represent corporations, independents represent the constituents. I went to my first ever all candidates meeting last night, and I was murdered would be a bit of an exaggeration, but certainly both the NDP, there were two NDP candidates there and one conservative, and they both ganged up on me when I dared to say anything against SOGI. They said, we've got to protect the kids, and I told my response to that was, that statement implies that the kids need protecting, that somehow people like myself are against the kids, we're attacking them, we're discriminating against them. That's not the case at all. I described SOGI as exactly what it is. I called it a crime against humanity. And they all rolled their eyes. Interestingly, one of the NDP candidates there was Raj Chouhan, who is the Speaker of the House. He is the same Speaker who was sitting in the chair when Bruce Banman, a Conservative MLA from Abbotsford, one of the Abbotsford ridings, Bruce Banman stood up in the legislature and started to read from one of the books, from one of the pornographic books that are available in school libraries, accessible by kids as young as 5 and 6 years old. Banman started to read from that book, and Raj Chouhan, the Speaker of the House, shut him down. Shut Bruce Banman down, saying, we don't tolerate that kind of language in this House. To which Banman just retracted his comments and apologized and sat down. He should have stood up and called out the Speaker and said, Mr. Speaker, if this kind of language is not permitted in this House with a bunch of so-called adults in the room, how the hell is it appropriate for 5 and 6-year-old kids? And so ends my speech for now.
Children who are taught crap in schools, not academics. They're indoctrinated. Sexualization of children are going behind closed doors, and parents have no idea. So you need to face us. You need to give up your job, the cushy job you got. You're getting paid from home, while we suffer and our kids suffer, and there is no transparency. You remember this election, you if you have some shame, you will resign. Thank you, everyone. Coming from far and near, especially Abbotsford, Cloverdale, and Coquitlam, New West. Thank you all. Thank you for joining us. This means a lot.
She pretends she's our minister, she's our MLA. But when the constitutes come to meet her, they close the office and run away. The office that paid, whose rent is paid by our tax dollars. The staff is paid by us. This building is not only MLA Rachna Singh's office, it's also Surrey Teachers Union. Boo Surrey Teachers Union and BC Education Minister Rachna Singh. So just for your introduction, we all know what SOGI is, but let me give you an example. There is a school called Sullivan Heights Secondary School in Surrey. 18 students identify as animals in those schools because they teach children you can identify anything. So they behave like cats and dogs, 18 students. So I am talking to principal of Sullivan Heights Secondary, principal and vice principal. You are involved in a criminal act. You made 18 students believe that they are animals, and every single day they behave as if they're animals. Their friends know, teachers know. Who does not know? Their parents don't know. Those parents have no clue whose children identify as animals. It's a criminal. We will soon start protesting in front of that school, Sullivan Heights Secondary, because we need to make those animals humans again. Make student animals humans again. It's criminal. We have the media in Surrey, many journalists, radio stations. We have let them know, but they don't do anything. The children think they are animal because they are brainwashed, indoctrinated, and everyone is okay with it. But we are not. We will go to that school. We will
show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.